Why was everyone so sure she didn't belong there? The mud of Aegis training grounds clung to everything: boots, uniforms, even the air. It had a stench that seemed engineered to break a person down. Earth, diesel, sweat, and iron. The place wasn't built for comfort. It was built for exposure, to reveal what was buried deep inside a person, whether strength or weakness. She stepped into that world without a sound. Vance. No one knew who she really was. To them, she was just another recruit, a face in a sea of hard edges and loud egos. But the way she moved, calm, measured, precise, already made her different. Where the others stomped, she glided. Where they shouted, she simply breathed. And that quiet, it drew attention. The barracks were alive with noise, laughter, arguments, boots hitting the floor. A dozen young men, all trying to sound tougher than the next. At the doorway, Ara stood still, duffel bag hanging from her shoulder as if it weighed nothing. Her eyes scanned the space, exits, beams, shadows, lines of movement. It wasn't conscious. It was instinct. When she crossed the threshold, the air seemed to shift, just slightly, just enough for the loudest of them to notice. "Look at that," muttered Jax, a broad-shouldered recruit with a jaw like a cliff face. Recruitment must be scraping the bottom of the barrel. His friends chuckled: Kale, Ivan, Ree, and Ole, a small, inseparable pack built on muscle and arrogance. They didn't whisper, they wanted her to hear. "Think she can even lift a rifle?" Kale added, his tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Maybe she's logistics. Someone gotta carry our medals." Their laughter was sharp, cutting through the room like shrapnel. Ara gave no sign she'd heard them. She set her bag down on the lower bunk, unzipped it, and began unpacking with the same precision one might use to assemble a rifle. Every movement was deliberate. Socks rolled with exact symmetry. Shirt folded into perfect rectangles. Cleaning kit aligned like an altar. Her silence was disarming, not submissive, not shy, just absolute control. Jax frowned. He wasn't used to being ignored. Weakness he understood, arrogance he understood, but indifference, that was a language he didn't speak. "Hey, bookworm," he called out, loud enough for the whole bay to hear. "You know this is the sharp end of the spear, right? Not a library." She turned her head, slow, unhurried, and looked at him. Her eyes were gray, not cold, not warm, just unreadable. The kind of eyes that saw more than they revealed. She held his gaze a heartbeat too long, then turned back to her things. The dismissal was total. Jax's smirk faltered. The quiet confidence in her refusal to engage struck deeper than any insult. He started forward, but Kale caught his arm. "Let it go," he said. "Rooric will break her. Let the gunny do the work." Jax grinned, regaining his composure. "Yeah, she won't last a week." Outside, a whistle screamed through the cold afternoon air. The recruits scrambled to formation, mud sucking at their boots. Above them, the clouds thickened, a storm building, just like the one brewing between Ara and her new world. Gunnery Sergeant Rooric stood before them, back straight, voice like gravel in an engine block. A man carved from old wars and bad memories. "Look to your left," he barked. "Now to your right. In 3 months most of you won't be here. You'll wash out, break down, or go back to whatever cushy post you crawled from. This place doesn't make soldiers. It burns away the ones pretending to be." His eyes swept across the line like radar, pausing when they met Ara's face. He didn't like what he saw. "This is not a place for the weak," he continued. "This is not a place for the hesitant. We find your breaking point. We push you past it. If you're found wanting, you'll be discarded. If you endure, you'll be remade in fire and steel. Do you understand me?" A chorus thundered back, "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant." Except for one. Ara didn't move, didn't speak. To Rooric, her silence was defiance. To her, it was logic. The question didn't require an answer, it was rhetorical. Wasting breath was inefficient. And just like that, she was marked. When the rain began, it came hard and cold, plastering their uniforms to their skin. The others shifted and cursed under their breath. Ara simply stood still, eyes fixed on the horizon as if waiting for something. That night the whispers spread. She's weird. Doesn't talk. Probably breaks easy. In the mess hall they tested her. They made sure her food tray was accidentally bumped, her seat taken. She ate alone, back straight, eyes on her plate. When Jax muttered something crude within earshot, she lifted her fork, speared a potato, and chewed slow, unbothered. It wasn't defiance, it was absence. She had erased them from her equation. And that drove them insane. Rooric's disapproval became daily ritual. During the physical assessments, he followed her like a shadow, barking insults. Move it, Vance. My grandmother carries more than that and she's dead. She didn't rise to it, didn't argue. She adjusted her posture, conserving energy, relying on balance instead of brute strength. She wasn't trying to win the sprint. She was testing her limits, cataloging every reaction, every weakness. When the course ended, she finished mid-pack. To Rooric, that was failure. To her, it was data. Barely average, he grunted to his assistant, Sergeant Chun. No aggression, no fire, she'll break. Chun studied her quietly as she rehydrated, already breathing evenly while others were gasping for air. Maybe, he said, but her recovery time's off the charts. It's like she's not even trying. That's the problem, Rooric snapped. She's not. That night the rain returned. Ara sat by the window watching droplets streak down the glass. Outside, floodlights cut pale lines through the storm. The air smelled of wet earth and metal. She sat motionless, a shadow among shadows, her mind elsewhere in the space between memory and instinct. Somewhere far away she remembered a voice, calm, measured, authoritative. Adaptation is survival echo, not emotion. She blinked, and the memory faded like static. Echo. No one here called her that. No one here knew. The next morning, during tactical theory, the cadets crowded into a classroom that smelled faintly of chalk and coffee. They were restless, competitive. When the instructor, a visiting intelligence captain, posed a scenario, hands shot up like weapons raised. Enemy sniper team, the captain said. Urban environment, limited assets, civilian presence, what's your move? Jax was the first to answer, voice booming with false confidence. Flank hard and storm the building. Shock and awe. The captain nodded politely, then looked around. Anyone else? Silence, then softly. What's the weather? Every head turned. Ara's tone was calm, curious, analytical. The captain frowned. Clear day, light wind from the west, two-story buildings, mostly concrete and rebar. What time? 1400 hours. She paused. You don't engage the sniper, you engage the spotter. Murmurs rippled through the room. At that hour, she continued, the sun's in the southwest. The sniper team will use east-facing windows with the sun at their back. Their exfil route will run away from the light. Neutralize the spotter, the brain, and the sniper becomes blind. Then you can end it cleanly. The room was silent. It wasn't just correct, it was precise, layered, professional. The captain stared at her. That's an advanced answer. Jax scoffed. Yeah, until real bullets fly. The tension broke and laughter followed, but not from the captain. He just watched her, eyes narrowed, as if trying to place something familiar in her calmness. At the back of the room, Rooric crossed his arms. He wasn't impressed. Book smarts, he muttered, won't save you in a fight. But a seed of unease had already planted itself deep, beneath all his disdain. Later that week the drills grew harsher. Less theory, more pain, close quarters combat, the kill house. The corridors smelled of sweat and spent powder. Fluorescent lights flickered like dying stars. The recruits lined up as Rooric paced before them, grinning like a wolf. Today, he said, we separate the lions from the sheep. He gestured toward the maze of rooms and corners. You'll run the gauntlet, 3 opponents, full contact. You stop when you're dead or they are. pain is your teacher." The recruits shouted acknowledgement. Adrenaline filled the air. One by one they ran, they fought, they bled. Some made it through, most didn't. Jack stormed down the corridor like a freight train, leaving chaos behind him. Rooric clapped him on the shoulder. "That's what I want to see, aggression." Then only a few remained. Rooric stopped packing. His gaze found Aura. He smiled, the kind of smile that hides cruelty. "Change of plan," he said. "Combat isn't one-on-one, it's about overwhelming force. Jax, take your team, you 5 opposition force." He turned back to her. "Vance, you're the runner." A stunned silence fell over the room. Even Chun flinched. "Gunny, that's 5-on-1. "It's my test, Sergeant." Rooric's voice was final. The recruits grinned. It was open season. Aura didn't argue. She simply tightened her chin strap. The click echoed in the silence like the sound of inevitability. Jax's smirk widened. "Try not to cry, sweetheart." But something in her eyes had changed. The calm was still there, but behind it, something sharp flickered to life. The buzzer sounded. And in that single metallic scream, everything she'd endured, every insult, every doubt condensed into one moment. No one was ready for what would happen next. The buzzer screamed. For a split second, no one moved. Then 5 bodies surged forward, a wall of noise and confidence. Jax led the charge, his boots hammering against the concrete floor, his voice a raw snarl. His men followed: Kale, Ivan, Ree, Ole, Muscle, and Fury wrapped in training pads. They were the embodiment of everything the program celebrated: aggression, strength, dominance. Aura didn't move. She breathed once, slow, centered. Then, like a wisp of smoke, she disappeared. One step left, a shadow swallowed her. Their formation broke instantly. They had charged a ghost. Kale saw her first, a flicker in the doorway. He lunged, eager to be first, eager to make her pay for her silence. His hands reached for her throat, but she wasn't there anymore. Her right hand slapped his wrist, accelerating his reach instead of blocking it. Her left foot hooked behind his ankle. His own momentum turned on him. He fell forward, the side of his head slamming into the doorframe with a dull crack. Before gravity even finished its work, her fingers jabbed the cluster of nerves at his neck. His body went limp. 2 seconds, 1 down. Ivan blinked, re-hesitated, Ole cursed. Jax froze. For the first time since the program began, the laughter died in his throat. Aura stepped from the shadows, calm, balanced. She didn't attack, not yet. She waited. Ivan swung first, fists raised in a clumsy boxer's stance. She dropped low, shoulder driving into his abdomen. He folded, breath exploding out of him. Her hand found the small of his back, and she used him, pushed off him, spinning into a rising elbow that caught Ree squarely in the temple. Plastic cracked. Ree staggered sideways, eyes rolling. Before Ivan could recover, her boot snapped into the back of his knee. The joint folded the wrong way. His scream echoed off the walls, high, shocked, human. 3 seconds, 2 down. From the observation room, the instructors stared in silence. The cadets who had been laughing moments before now leaned forward, eyes wide, jaws slack. The sound of impact after impact echoed through the kill house like drumbeats of inevitability. This wasn't fighting, it was deconstruction. Ole bellowed and charged, a massive frame built for demolition. He swung a haymaker meant to end her, the kind of punch that could break bone through padding. She didn't block it. She swayed back, the air shifted by an inch. His fist whistled past her face. In that inch lived her entire world: awareness, precision, inevitability. As he stumbled past, she drove 2 fingers into the soft space beneath his ribs. His breath left in a rush, body folding forward. She followed with a hammer strike to the base of his skull. He went down without a sound. 4 seconds, 3 down. Ree, still dazed, made a desperate grab. She pivoted inside his reach, her arm looping around his neck. One hand braced his chin, the other twisted sharply, not hard enough to break, just enough for the training sensors to flash kill confirmed. He hit the floor in a heap. 5 seconds, 4 down. Now only Jax remained. The corridor smelled of sweat, rubber, and disbelief. He looked around, his men scattered like broken statues. His breath came ragged, his pride shattered. He screamed, charging her like an animal. Her body shifted just enough. She gave him air, space to destroy himself. Each wild punch meant nothing but shadow. His boots slipped on sweat-slick concrete. He kept coming, desperate, furious, afraid. She didn't strike back, not yet. Every movement, every dodge, every measured step backward was a calculation. She was letting him feel the loss, making him live in it. When he finally lunged, reckless and spent, she stepped aside. One hand caught his collar and she dropped her weight. His momentum carried him over her hip. For a moment he was airborne, a man suspended in disbelief. Then the ground met him, hard. The air rushed out of his lungs. He gasped, stunned. Before he could react, she straddled him, one knee pinning his arm, her hand gripping his throat. She didn't squeeze. She just held him there, firmly, calmly, her gray eyes unblinking. The fight was over. Jack stopped struggling. The corridor fell silent. 87 seconds. 5 men down. Ara stood, brushed the dust from her pants, and walked toward the end of the corridor. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her pulse, if anyone had measured it, would have been steady. The silence that followed wasn't awe. It was recalibration, the sound of 100 assumptions breaking at once. Even gunnery Sergeant Rooric stood frozen. His knuckles whitened around the edge of the console. He had wanted to humiliate her. Instead, he had unveiled something he couldn't define. The others stared at the monitors. Some whispered, some prayed. None of them understood what they had just seen. Rooric moved before he could think. He pushed past the stunned recruits and stormed into the gauntlet. The smell of blood and adrenaline hit him like smoke. Medics knelt beside the fallen, checking vitals, wrapping bandages. Jack sat slumped against a wall, eyes wide, chest heaving. Ara stood at the far end, calm, water bottle in hand. Not a scratch on her. Rooric stopped a few feet away. His shadow fell across her. "Reports," he growled. She lowered the bottle, expression unchanged. "Objective complete, gunnery sergeant." "That's not what I asked." His voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What was that? That was not CQC protocol. I saw joint locks, nerve strikes, kill zone techniques. Where did you learn it?" Her answer was simple: other training. "Don't play games with me," he snapped, stepping closer. "What unit? What program?" Before she could speak, another voice intervened, calm, precise, unhurried. "That's enough, Gunny." The voice carried authority, the kind that didn't need to shout. Commander Thorne emerged from the shadows at the kill house entrance. His uniform bore no unit patch, no name tape, just rank. His presence drew immediate stillness. Rooric stiffened. "Sir, this is a training matter." "It's a personnel matter now." Thorne's tone was soft but final. He walked past Rooric and stopped in front of Ara. "You were instructed to maintain a low profile, Echo." The word hit the room like a detonation. Echo. No one moved, no one breathed. To most of the recruits, it meant nothing. But to the senior instructors, the color drained from their faces. Rooric's jaw tightened. "Sir, did you say Echo?" Thorne met his eyes. "I did." The silence deepened. Rooric swallowed hard. "That call sign's classified. Onyx level clearance, sir. What the hell is she doing in my training cycle?" Thorne exhaled, weary. "You deserve context." He looked back at Ara, not with anger but with a kind of sadness. "Have you ever heard of Project Chimera?" The words rippled through the instructors like a physical blow. Rooric's voice dropped. That ghost story, the one from the black budget years, myth, decommissioned a decade ago. Thorne shook his head slowly. The funding stopped, the assets didn't. He turned toward Ara. She's one of them, a prototype that survived the shutdown. You wanted to test her, you just did. Rooric's face drained of color. His mind replayed every moment, her silence, her precision, her lack of emotion. Everything he'd mistaken for weakness now formed a horrifying picture. Project Chimera, the initiative designed to create operatives who could function in isolation, weapons disguised as soldiers. They were trained from childhood, conditioned to operate beyond fear, beyond anger, beyond doubt. He had mocked a ghost. She's not here for selection, Thorne continued. She's here for recalibration, a transition back into human teams, to learn boundaries again. Rooric looked at her, really looked for the first time. Her eyes weren't cold, they were empty, a calm too deep to be natural. He felt his stomach twist. How do you train something that was never meant to be human? She didn't react to the revelation. She didn't seem embarrassed or proud. She simply stood still, breathing quietly through her nose. For a moment, she looked like a statue carved not from stone, but from discipline. Thorne turned back to Rooric. Your test is concluded. He gave Ara a faint nod. We'll speak later, Echo, then to the others, dismissed. When he left, the silence that remained was heavier than any order. The room shifted. The recruits looked at her differently now, no longer a target but a presence. Jack struggled to his feet, body trembling. He looked at her like a man seeing a ghost. She didn't meet his eyes. She walked past him calm, unhurried. The air around her seemed colder, sharper. As she left the kill house, the others stood in silence, 5 broken men, and one legend none of them understood. That night no one spoke in the barracks. The usual laughter was gone, replaced by uneasy quiet. Somewhere near midnight, Jax woke from a dream, or maybe it was memory. He could still feel her grip around his throat, the absolute control in her hands. He sat up, chest heaving, sweat cold on his skin. Across the room, Ara sat on her bunk staring out the window. Her posture was straight, still, unreal. The moonlight caught her eyes, dull silver, flat and endless. For a moment he thought she looked sad. Then she blinked once, and the emotion vanished. The next morning, the story had spread across the base like wildfire. 5-on-1, 87 seconds, no bruises. By breakfast it had turned mythic. By noon it was legend. But the truth, the quiet truth, was simpler. Ara Vance had not fought to win. She had fought to measure the world that misjudged her. And now the world was beginning to measure itself against her. What happens after fear replaces arrogance? By dawn, the entire Aegis compound knew her name. Ara Vance, the ghost who dropped 5 men in under 90 seconds. The story twisted as stories do. Some said she'd moved faster than the eye could follow. Others swore she hadn't made a single sound, that the fight had been over before the buzzer finished echoing. None of them were exactly wrong. The mess hall that morning was quieter than a church. Trays clattered, chairs scraped, but conversation came in murmurs. When Ara entered, conversation stopped entirely. She crossed the room the same way she always did, steady, eyes forward, steps measured. But now the silence parted for her like a tide. The recruits shifted aside, giving her a clear path to the end table. No one had told them to. It simply happened. Jack sat with his crew, bandaged and sore, a bruise dark around his throat. His fork hovered midair. He told himself not to look, but his eyes betrayed him. She passed, head high, expression unreadable. She didn't glance at him, didn't slow, didn't smirk, just walked by. And somehow that hurt more than the fight. When she reached her seat, she set down her tray, folded her hands, and began to eat. Each movement deliberate, mechanical, peaceful. It wasn't victory, it was maintenance. For the rest of them, it was unbearable. Kale's arm was in a sling. Ivan limped on a brace. Rhys still moved like his skull hadn't fully forgiven him. Ole stared into his oatmeal as if it might explain what had happened. They didn't speak of her now, not openly. They just carried the echo of her presence, an unspoken awareness that the hierarchy had changed forever. Even Rooric kept his distance. He'd watched the footage a dozen times in his office that night, eyes bloodshot, hands clenched. Frame by frame, he studied her movements, the shifts of weight, the micro-adjustments of balance, the perfect conservation of motion. No rage, no hesitation, no waste. Every second was a lesson he couldn't teach. When dawn finally pried the dark from the windows, he looked up from the monitor, feeling something alien in his chest, humility. He'd spent decades molding recruits with volume and punishment, convinced pain built warriors. But Vance had just dismantled that belief in 87 seconds of silent efficiency. He hated that it fascinated him. So when the next training block arrived, long-range marksmanship, he decided to test something different. The wind at the range was erratic, cutting sideways across the valley. Targets shimmered in the heat at 500 meters. The cadets lay prone behind their rifles, faces pressed to scopes, breaths shallow. Rooric walked the line, barking corrections in his usual rasp. "When's your enemy, Diaz? Don't fight it, read it. Miller, your trigger pull looks like you're strangling a cat." When he reached the farthest position, he stopped. Ara lay perfectly still, body and rifle fused into one shape. No wasted muscle, no twitch, no tell. The breeze tugged at a few loose strands of her hair. She didn't notice him standing there. Her breathing was slow, even perfectly timed. Inhale, hold, exhale, the rhythm of inevitability. Then the first shot broke. A single crack, the recoil nudged her shoulder. The casing pinged softly against the mat. She cycled the bolt, chambered another, fired again, and again. 5 rounds, each identical, no corrections, no hesitation. Rooric lifted his binoculars. The target downrange showed not 5 holes, but one ragged, widened mark dead center of the bull's. He lowered the glass slowly. His throat felt tight. He had expected precision. He hadn't expected perfection. He said nothing for a long time, then finally, "Vance." She turned her head slightly, one eye still behind the scope. He studied her face. No pride, no satisfaction, just quiet acknowledgement. "After these clowns are done," he said, his voice lower than usual, "you're with me. We'll run the advanced sniper qual, instructor level, 1,000 meters moving targets." It wasn't an order, it was an invitation. Her gaze held his for half a breath, then she nodded once and returned to the scope. Rooric walked away without another word, the gravel under his boots suddenly loud in his ears. He didn't know if she'd heard the apology buried inside that offer. Maybe she had. Maybe she didn't need to. That evening the air at Aegis felt different. The barracks hummed with a wary calm, respect replacing hostility, all replacing mockery. Some recruits tried to approach her now, clumsy attempts at conversation. A few offered polite nods. One even said, "Ma'am." She responded the same to all, a faint nod, a small courteous word, and the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She wasn't cold, just distant. And sometimes, in that distance, you could sense a wound deeper than anything training could inflict. When night fell, most cadets collapsed into sleep. Exhaustion at Aegis was its own drug. But in Barrack C, one bed stayed empty. Ara moved through the corridors like a shadow that had learned to breathe. Bare feet, silent steps, pulse steady. The armory door loomed ahead, steel and keypad. A red light blinked above the handle. She typed a code. The lock hissed open. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of solvent, gun oil, and iron. Racks of weapons stood in perfect lines, gleaming under low amber light. She moved to a workbench, laid out her rifle, and began to strip it down. Pins slid free. Bolts came apart. The pieces spread out before her like a constellation of mechanical truths. It didn't need cleaning, not after a day like this, but the ritual mattered. The sound of metal against cloth, the rhythm of motion, it calmed her. When the rifle was in pieces, she sat for a moment, eyes unfocused, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights. Her fingers trembled once, just barely, before she steadied them again. Sometimes peace felt heavier than battle. The door hissed open. She didn't turn. She'd heard him coming 30 paces ago. Couldn't sleep either. Rooric's voice was rougher than usual, stripped of command. He carried a small wooden box, set it on the next bench, opened it. Inside, nestled in velvet, was an old .45 pistol, edges worn gray from years of use. He disassembled it slowly, pieces laid out with reverence. 2 soldiers, 2 weapons, 2 parallel silences. For a long time, the only sounds were metal clicks, the whisper of cloth, the faint electric hum. Finally he spoke. "Project Chimera, I heard it got shut down." She slid her bolt carrier back into place, locked it. The click echoed softly. "Some things don't stay shut down," she said. "They just get new names." Rooric nodded. "Figures." He ran a cloth along the barrel of his pistol. "We all serve something we don't understand." She glanced at him. "Do you?" He smiled faintly, lines deepening around his eyes. "Used to think I did." Silence settled again, not awkward but heavy, respectful. When he finished, he crossed the short distance between them. In his hand was a small, worn whetstone, dark from decades of use. "For your blade," he said quietly, "a good soldier stays sharp, a great one keeps the edge fine." She looked at the stone, then at him. It was more than a gift, it was surrender. Her fingers brushed his as she took it. "Thank you, Gunny." It was the first time she'd used the title without stiffness. He nodded once and left, boots echoing down the corridor. She stood there for a long while, the stone cool in her palm. Outside, dawn had begun to smudge the horizon with gray. She slipped the stone into her pocket. The weight was small, solid, a reminder that not all weapons were forged from steel. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something like belonging. Fragile, incomplete, but real. Still, beneath that faint warmth, another truth pulsed. Project Chimera never released its ghosts. And sometimes ghosts don't haunt places, they haunt themselves. She reassembled her rifle piece by piece, until it felt whole again, until she did. The first light of morning caught the edge of the weapon, turning the metal silver. For an instant, it looked almost alive. In that brief reflection, her expression softened, the barest flicker of something human, caught between exhaustion and grace. Then it was gone. She set the rifle aside, stood and faced the door. Behind her, the armory returned to silence. 2 benches, 2 weapons, and a memory of mutual understanding. Outside, the wind carried the faintest echo of rain. Training would begin again soon. The tests would get harder. But for the first time since she'd arrived, Vance wasn't walking into battle against her peers. She was walking beside them, even if they didn't know it yet. What happens when a ghost is asked to be human? A week after the gauntlet, the Aegis compound began a new cycle, live fire combat simulations. It was supposed to be a test of teamwork. For Vance, it was something else entirely. The first time she would have to move beside others rather than through them. The day started before sunrise. Fog hung low across the training valley, thick enough to blur the outlines of the range towers. The air carried the damp, metallic scent of spent brass. Inside the ready room, recruits checked weapons, adjusted armor straps, joked nervously. Only Ara sat still, eyes half closed, breathing slow. Sergeant Chun read from the slate. Exercise Delta, 12-man assault team capture and extract. Hostile elements simulated by instructors. Real ammunition safety limits active. Team Alpha, Jax, Kale, Ree, Ole, and Vance. The room went still. A few glances darted toward her, uncertain whether to be relieved or terrified. Jax's jaw tightened. The bruise on his throat had faded to yellow. He gave a short nod, acknowledgement, not challenge. Rooric stood at the door, arms folded. "Out there, nobody cares about your pride," he said. "Win together or fail together." His eyes met Aura's for a fraction of a second. "You hear that, Vance?" She did not answer, only reached for her rifle. Adaptation is survival, a voice from somewhere in her memory whispered, not emotion. They boarded the troop carrier in silence. The engine roared, gravel sprayed behind them. Aura watched the fog rolling past the windows, a gray ocean swallowing the world. Jax sat across from her, his hands restless on his weapon. Finally he spoke low. "What are you?" Aura looked up. "A soldier." He hesitated. "You weren't born that way." "No," she said, "none of us were." The carrier jolted to a stop before the range gates. The rear hatch slammed open. Cold air poured in, sharp and alive. The loudspeaker crackled. "Exercise Delta begin." They moved. The field was a skeletal village of concrete shells and half-collapsed walls. Simulated hostiles waited somewhere inside, instructors armed with paint marker rounds that stung like wasp bites. The mission was simple: locate the hostage, extract, exfil. Simple never meant easy. Jax led the way, motion cautious but confident. Aura followed third position, scanning angles, tracking wind shifts that could betray hidden shooters. The fog muffled everything except the crunch of gravel under boots and the click of safeties. They reached the first building. Kale kicked the door, nothing clear. The second was not. Gunfire cracked short, controlled bursts. Paint rounds slapped the walls. The team dove for cover. Someone cursed. Jax barked orders, voice hoarse. "Flank left," Vance, eyes high. She obeyed without hesitation, sliding through a side doorway. Her movement was liquid, economical. Two instructors waited inside, rifles raised. She saw the muzzle flash before the sound reached her. She ducked, pivoted, fired twice. 2 marks on 2 vests. "Clear." Outside, the others advanced, hearts pounding. For the first time, Aura was fighting with them, not against them. Her precision covered their chaos. Their noise covered her silence. They reached the central courtyard. The hostage dummy lay inside a small structure, wire mesh and plywood. As Jax signaled entry, the fog shifted, and with it, something in Aura's mind. For a heartbeat, she wasn't in a simulation. The air smelled different, sand, not soil, burning fuel instead of diesel, shouting in another language. The crack of live rounds, not training paint. Memory or hallucination, she couldn't tell. Her pulse spiked, then flattened again. She blinked, forcing the image away. The courtyard returned to gray. But the echo of that other place lingered, ghost-like, behind her ribs. They breached. A flashbang exploded. White light, ringing ears, the metallic taste of adrenaline. Through it, Aura moved on instinct, grabbing the dummy, slinging it over her shoulder with effortless precision. "Move." Rounds peppered the doorway as they exited. Kale stumbled, pulled him upright. Jax covered rear. The extraction truck roared into view through the fog. They piled in. "Exercise complete," the loudspeaker announced. "Time 4 minutes 20 seconds. Silence filled the carrier on the ride back. Not tension, something heavier, understanding. Jax finally exhaled. "You saved us back there." Aura looked at him. "We saved the mission." He nodded once, accepting her terms. Rooric waited at the range gate when they dismounted. He studied the group, sweaty, paint-spattered, breathing hard. "Fastest completion this cycle," he said. "Nobody downed. That's how it's supposed to look." His gaze lingered on Aura. "Good work, team." For the first time, he said team and meant it. That night the barracks buzzed with low energy instead of hostility. Someone played a soft tune on a harmonica. Laughter came cautiously, like an animal testing open ground. The frost around Aura had begun to melt. She sat on her bunk, polishing her rifle, listening to the music. Jax approached, hesitant. "We're running drills again tomorrow. Thought you might join us." She glanced up, voluntary. He shrugged. "Better to learn from the person who broke us than pretend it didn't happen." The faintest smile touched her lips. "Then I'll be there." When he walked away, she exhaled, slow, deliberate. It felt strange, this tentative bridge of respect. Strange and fragile. Later, alone, she opened the small locker at the foot of her bed. Inside lay the whetstone Rooric had given her. She held it in her palm, thumb brushing the smooth surface. For years, she had been trained to keep an edge so sharp it could cut emotion out of her entirely. Now she wondered if dulling it, just slightly, wasn't weakness but choice. The base slept. She didn't. Her dreams came in fragments. A desert city at night, static over comms, the smell of cordite, a child's cry cut short. And always the same voice, thorns, saying, "You were built for silence," echo. She woke before dawn, heartbeat steady again, face expressionless. Outside, the horizon burned pale orange. A new day, another test. The next week blurred into repetition. Drills, marksmanship, navigation, endurance runs through mud and storm. Yet beneath the routine, something subtle changed. Where once she had walked alone, now others paced beside her. Rooric watched it happen with quiet astonishment. Leadership, he realized, didn't always roar. Sometimes it simply endured until the world adjusted around it. During a break, Chun approached him. "She's stabilizing," he said. "Maybe Thorn was right. She's remembering how to be part of a unit." Rooric grunted. "Or we're remembering how to see one." Still, a question haunted him. If Project Chimera was real, what ghosts lived in her silence? He got his answer sooner than he wanted. The night exercise was supposed to be routine, navigation through the canyon under blackout conditions. No live rounds, no enemy contact, just endurance. Halfway through, the storm rolled in, lightning, torrential rain, wind that turned the canyon into a funnel of noise. Radio comms flickered and died. The team huddled under an outcropping, water streaming off their helmets. "We're off course," Kale shouted over the wind. Ara studied the compass, glowing faintly in her hand. "No," the map grid shifted. "We're still on track if we move east through the ravine." "How can you tell?" Ree asked. She pointed toward the lightning flashing on the ridgeline. "See the rock face? Iron deposits. That distortion's what's killing the signal." Rooric's voice crackled faintly through static. "Alpha, report." Jax keyed his mic. "Still mobile, Gunny, moving east." No reply, only static. They advanced single file, boots slipping in mud. Thunder rolled across the canyon walls like artillery. Then, somewhere behind them, a shape moved, too quiet to be an echo. "Hold," Ara whispered. They froze. Through the rain, she saw what the others couldn't. The silhouette of a man without training pads holding a real weapon. Not simulation. Not one of theirs. She raised a fist. "Contact." Jack swore. "Hostile out here." "Unknown." She signaled low. Two moved left, two right. Her heart didn't race, it narrowed. Every nerve calibrated. When the lightning flashed again, the silhouette vanished. Then came the shot. Real, unmistakable. The round sparked against stone inches from Kale's head. "Down," Jax yelled. They dove for cover. Paint rounds didn't sound like that. This was live fire. Ara scanned the slope. The muzzle flash gave the position away. High ground, ridge line, 200 meters. Her voice was calm. "Sniper, one, maybe two." Jax cursed again. "We don't have authorization to engage." "Then we survive." She slid onto her stomach, rifle braced against the wet earth. Wind roared, rain pounded. She closed her eyes for one breath, feeling the gusts shift, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. Then she opened them, sight aligned with inevitability. The flash came again. Her finger moved. The rifle cracked once. "Silence." The team stared at her. The ridge went still. She lowered the rifle slowly. "Clear." Jack swallowed hard. You just... She cut him off. Move, extraction point now. They didn't argue, they ran. By the time they reached the recovery truck, Rooric was there, rain soaking through his uniform. His face was carved stone. Report. Jack spoke first. Engaged unknown shooter. Vance neutralized threat. Rooric's jaw worked. Live fire confirmed, not part of the exercise. He looked at Ara. You good? She nodded once. Mission complete. He studied her a long moment, searching her face for any trace of emotion. There was none, only the quiet calm of necessity. Later, back at base, they learned the truth. A poacher from the nearby forest had wandered into the restricted zone, panicked when he saw the team, fired first. A tragic accident. That's what the report said. But Rooric saw the bullet's trajectory, the clean precision of her return shot. That wasn't reflex. That was memory. That night he found her in the armory again, sitting alone with the whetstone in her palm. The lights flickered soft gold across her face. You didn't hesitate, he said quietly. I don't. Ever. She looked up. That's what they built me for. And what do you want? For the first time her composure cracked, a micro-expression, gone in a heartbeat. To stop being built. He had no answer. He left her there with the rain tapping the windows and the ghosts crowding the silence. What happens when silence starts to remember? 3 days after the canyon incident, Commander Thorne ordered a psychological evaluation. Officially, it was routine procedure after any live fire encounter. Unofficially, everyone knew it was about her. The evaluation wing of Aegis was nothing like the rest of the base. No mud, no echoing barracks, no barking sergeants. Just white walls, humming lights, and the faint antiseptic smell of a place designed to make you talk. Vance sat in a narrow chair across from Dr. Renat Kozlov, the facility psychologist. Kozlov was a small woman with calm eyes and the kind of voice that could smooth razor wire. The recorder on the table blinked red. Name, Kozlov said softly. Vance. Rank. None assigned. Designation. A pause. Echo. Kozlov nodded. And how do you feel, Echo? The question hung between them like static. Ara's gaze stayed steady, operational. Not how you're functioning, the doctor said. How do you feel? Ara blinked once. That word doesn't apply. Kozlov smiled faintly. It does to everyone eventually. For the next hour the questions circled her like cautious scouts. Sleep patterns, dreams, reactions to sound, memory gaps. Kozlov's voice was patient, relentless. Ara answered each one precisely, emotionless, until the doctor shifted tactics. When you neutralized the shooter in the canyon, she asked, what did you feel? Ara's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Nothing. The equation resolved. And after? Still nothing. Echo, you hesitated before you answered. Ara's jaw tightened. Because the question doesn't change the result. Kozlov studied her for a long moment, then leaned forward. Sometimes results and reasons are not the same thing. No response. The doctor tapped the recorder off. Let me tell you something I see, she said gently. You were trained to erase your own reflection, but when you look away from yourself long enough, you stop recognizing what's human and what's function. That's not strength. That's damage. Ara's hands folded tightly in her lap. And what would you have me do with that knowledge, doctor? Start by admitting you're tired. Silence, then a whisper, I can't afford to be. Kozlov nodded, as if that was the truest answer possible. Then we'll keep talking. Outside the evaluation wing, Commander Thorne waited. Rooric stood beside him, hat tucked under one arm. Through the glass they watched Ara leave the room, posture straight, face unreadable. She said almost nothing, Kozlov reported quietly. But her pulse spiked twice, once when I said hesitated, once when I said tired. She's holding something down so hard it's going to surface eventually. Thorne's voice was low. That's what recalibration looks like. She's learning what not to kill in herself. Rooric frowned. That sounds poetic, sir. It also sounds dangerous. Thorne didn't disagree. The following days were quieter. Ara moved through the drills with mechanical grace, but the spark behind her calm seemed dimmer, as if part of her attention was turned inward. During tactical debriefings she listened, contributed sparingly, never challenged orders. Jax and his team still trained near her, still wary, but something like camaraderie had begun to grow in the silence between commands. On the range one afternoon, Kale muttered, "You ever get tired of being perfect?" Ara reloaded her rifle without looking up. "Perfection is inefficient. I aim for consistency." Jax chuckled softly. "That's the first joke I've heard you make." She glanced over, wasn't one. He grinned anyway, close enough. The small moment passed, but it stayed with both of them longer than they expected. That night rain hammered the roofs. Ara sat in the common room, the others asleep. A single lamp threw a circle of light across a table cluttered with maintenance gear. She cleaned her sidearm, slow, deliberate motions, but her mind drifted to the doctor's voice. "Admit you're tired." "Tired." The word echoed in her head like an unfamiliar frequency. When the lightning flashed, she saw not the room but a desert city at night. Her hands slick with someone else's blood. A child's face reflected in a broken window. Then static, always static. She blinked and the vision vanished. Only rain, only silence. Her hands trembled once before she forced them still. The next morning, a new directive came down. Full simulation, multi-team operation, real-time strategy coordination under Commander Thorne's observation. The scenario mimicked a hostage recovery deep behind enemy lines. 12 recruits divided into 3 fire teams. Ara was assigned as tactical lead for Bravo. Jax volunteered for her team without hesitation. Rooric raised an eyebrow but said nothing. The mission unfolded in a network of abandoned warehouses converted into training zones. High catwalks, flickering lights, narrow corridors. Live drones tracked every movement for post-analysis. "Bravo, move on grid C," Thorne's voice echoed through the comms. "Alpha advancing on west flank." Ara's responses were crisp. "Copy, 2-3 split, cover cross angles." Her commands came with effortless precision. The others followed without question. Inside, she felt something new, a low, unfamiliar warmth. Trust. Not of them, but of the rhythm they created together. For the first time, she didn't feel like a weapon deployed alone. She felt like a part of a living system. They reached the central building. Ara signaled halt, raised a hand. Thermals show movement, 2 hostiles, ground floor. Jax whispered, "Orders." She hesitated, just long enough for him to notice. "Yeko." Her mind wasn't in the warehouse anymore. It was somewhere else, another building, another hostage years ago, screaming. Fire. The last thing she remembered before blackout, a commander's voice shouting her code name through smoke. Then nothing. "Vance." She blinked, breath catching. "Breach left." They moved, flash, noise, chaos. When the smoke cleared, both hostiles were down, simulation sensors flashing blue. Objective secure. But Ara stood frozen for a fraction too long, rifle lowered, eyes distant. Later, during debrief, Thorne caught it on the playback, that single heartbeat of paralysis. He said nothing in front of the recruits, but afterward he found her alone by the target pits, disassembling her weapon. "You froze." She didn't look up for half a second. "Why?" "I remembered something I wasn't supposed to." "What?" "A fire, a child. I don't know if it was real." Thorne studied her face, the first crack in the armor. "Memory reconstruction is part of deconditioning. Let it happen. Don't run from it." She met his gaze. "I don't run, I calculate." "Then calculate this," he said softly. "If you don't face what they made you forget, You'll never know if the person standing here is Ara Vance or what's left of Echo. He left her with that question. It lingered long after the wind had cleared the smell of gun oil. The next day, Kozlov asked to see her again. Ara arrived without being ordered. She sat down, wordless, and waited. The doctor regarded her quietly. "Do you want to remember?" Ara hesitated. "I want control." "Control isn't peace. It's the only thing I was ever allowed." Kozlov nodded. "Then let's start with what you saw." This time Ara spoke not easily but with the flat cadence of someone defusing her own bomb. "Night operation. Civilian zone. Hostage extraction. There was fire. A child crying. I was told to clear the perimeter. When I came back, everything was gone. The child too." "Do you remember feeling anything?" "No, that's what disturbs me." Kozlov's voice softened. "You were trained not to feel. That training worked. But now you're not under their command. You have permission to be human again." Ara's hands tightened on the edge of the chair. "I don't know how." "That's what learning is." Silence stretched between them until Kozlov added, "Do you trust anyone here?" A long pause. "Rooric, maybe." The doctor smiled. "That's a start." Outside, rain had given way to clear sunlight. The compound glistened, new and raw. Ara stepped out of the clinic, blinking against the light. Across the yard, she saw Rooric drilling a group of cadets, his voice rough, his gestures precise. For the first time, she noticed the small limp in his right leg, the scar at his temple, the humanity in the man who had once tried to break her. When he caught her watching, he nodded. No words, none needed. Something inside her eased. That evening she found herself walking the perimeter wall alone, the horizon bleeding into gold. Every sound, boots on gravel, wind in wire, the faint laughter from the mess hall, felt almost beautiful. She realized she had stopped calculating distances. She was simply listening. For the first time, that felt like progress. Later in her bunk, she pulled the whetstone from her pocket, held it up to the light. The surface was dark, smooth, worn by years of friction. She thought of Rooric's words, "A good soldier stays sharp. A great one keeps the edge fine." She turned it over once, then set it on the windowsill, letting moonlight dull its sheen. Maybe, she thought, edges weren't meant to last forever. Maybe being human was learning when to stop sharpening. Sleep came slow but gentler. The dreams were still there, fire, static, the crying child. But this time she didn't wake in panic. She simply watched, breathing through it as if telling herself, "I see you now." Somewhere deep inside, the machine that had once been Echo took its first breath as Ara Vance. What happens when the past comes back, wearing a familiar voice? The calm that had settled over Aegis didn't last. It never does. Peace on a military base is only the pause between instructions. It was late evening when the alarms began. Low, steady, not frantic yet, the kind of sound that meant something important just broke the pattern. Ara Vance was in the gym, running slow laps along the track when the PA crackled. "All units report to operations. Immediate briefing." She slowed, heartbeat already steady. Her instincts didn't spike, they focused. Around her, recruits dropped weights, pulled on jackets, moved toward the main building in disciplined confusion. Inside operations, the lights were dim, screens glowing blue across tired faces. Commander Thorne stood at the center, Rooric beside him. A map of the southern training corridor flickered on the wall, red markers pulsing. Thorne's voice was calm. "An unauthorized aircraft went down 12 miles east of the perimeter. Classified cargo. We've got a recovery team en route, but comms are dead. You're the closest unit still combat ready." Rooric's eyes found Ara. "You're leading Bravo again." She didn't hesitate. "Objective. Secure the wreck, locate survivors, recover any data modules." Jax's voice came from the crowd. "Rules of engagement. Identify first. Fire only if fired upon," Thorne said. "This isn't a war zone, it's containment." Something in his tone hinted otherwise. Ara caught it. What kind of cargo? Thorn met her eyes. The kind you were built to understand. The room went still. No one breathed for a beat too long. Then Rooric barked, "Gear up." They moved fast. The trucks bounced through wet terrain, headlights cutting tunnels through mist. Jax sat across from Ara again, helmet loose on his knee. "You ever get used to this part?" he asked. She shook her head. "You're not supposed to." When they reached the tree line, the smell of smoke hit them, acrid, chemical. The downed craft was visible through the pines, one wing sheared off, fuselage cracked open like a wound. Flames hissed in the rain. Rooric gave quick orders. "Alpha, secure the perimeter. Bravo with Vance." They advanced toward the wreck. The heat shimmered, painting their faces in orange light. Ara's boots sank into soft mud scattered with debris, charred metal, fragments of composite plating, a black box half buried. She crouched, fingers brushing the scorched surface. The symbols stenciled there weren't standard issue. They were older, familiar. Her stomach tightened. "Gunny," she said quietly, "this isn't one of ours." Rooric stepped closer. "Explain." She traced a line of faded print. "Chimera div." "Project Chimera," she whispered. Rooric stared. "I thought." "So did I." Jax's voice cut in over comms. "Movement east side." They spun as a figure stumbled from the smoke. A man in flight overalls, face half burned, clutching a pistol. He raised it, then froze when he saw Ara. His eyes widened. Echo. Every rifle lowered an inch in confusion. Ara took a step forward. "Identify yourself." He swayed. "Unit 7, we trained together. You were the prototype." The name hit her like a pulse of heat. Unit 7. Memory flashed corridors lined with mirrors, children running drills in silence, voices reciting code numbers instead of names. His face appeared in fragments, younger, sharper, eyes full of the same obedience she once wore. Before she could speak, he collapsed. Rooric caught him, lowered him to the mud. Blood darkened his sleeve. "Medic." Ara knelt beside the fallen man. His breathing rattled. "The package," he gasped. "Don't let them take it back. It's not containment, it's recall." "What package?" she asked. He pointed weakly toward the wreck. "Core unit still active." His fingers dug into her sleeve. "They'll erase us, Echo, like we never existed." Then his hand went slack. They found the package minutes later, an alloy crate bolted to the floor of the cargo bay. No markings except a biometric lock. Ara touched it. The panel glowed faintly under her palm. Recognition. She pulled back. Jax frowned. "That thing just scanned you." "It's coded to Chimera operatives," she said. "Means whatever's inside is still part of the project." Rooric's expression darkened. Orders were to recover, not open. "Sir," she said quietly, "if that's a recall device, it could wipe every file, every record, including people." Thorn's voice crackled through comms before Rooric could answer. "Status." "Package secured," Rooric replied. "Good, do not open. Extraction inbound." The channel cut. Ara stared at the crate, rain streaking down her faceplate. Something in her chest, a mix of fear and memory, pulled against the command. She could almost hear the echo of drills, the metallic voice that once directed her. "Obey, preserve, erase evidence." Not this time. When the rotor sound of incoming transport rose over the trees, she made her choice. "Gunny," she said quietly, "permission to verify contents before transfer." "Denied." She met his eyes. "Then consider this my evaluation test." Before he could stop her, she placed her palm flat on the lock. The panel blinked green. The lid released with a hiss. Inside was a cryopod no larger than a coffin. Frost drifted from its seams. Through the glass, a face, young, almost peaceful, female. Wires ran from her temples. Jax whispered, "What the hell is that?" Ara's throat tightened. "Unit 9." Roaric's voice was low. "Another one of you." She nodded slowly. "She was a child when they pulled me out. I thought they terminated the rest." The transport descended overhead, engines roaring. Floodlights washed the clearing. Thorne stepped out as it landed, rain flattening against his coat. "Close that lid," he ordered. Roaric started to speak, but Ara's tone cut through him. "Sir, she's alive." "That's classified material, Lieutenant." "She's a person." Thorne's gaze hardened. "Not anymore. The recall directive stands, loaded up." Two soldiers moved forward. Ara stepped between them. "Echo," Thorne warned, "this is not your decision." Her jaw clenched. "You said I was here to relearn how to be human. This is what that looks like." Roaric moved closer, tension in every line of his body. "Commander, we should at least—" "Stand down, Gunny." The air cracked with rain and silence. Every rifle was raised, uncertain where to aim. Then Unit 9's eyes fluttered open inside the pod, pale, unfocused. A single tear cut through the frost on her cheek. Ara whispered, "She's awake." Thorne's composure faltered for the first time. "That's impossible." "Nothing about us ever was." She reached for the control panel, but the commander's voice thundered. "If you open that seal, Echo, you're in direct violation of your reinstatement." Ara's hand paused over the switch. "Then maybe I was never reinstated." Roaric's voice quieter. "Vance, think about what you're doing." "I am." She pressed the release. Steam hissed. The pod unlocked. Unit 9 gasped, lungs dragging in the cold night air. Her eyes focused on Ara, recognition sparking, faint but real. "Echo," she whispered. Thorne cursed, "Contain her." Roaric's men hesitated. So did he. Ara's body shifted instinctively between the girl and the guns. "She's not your enemy," Ara said. "She's proof you lied. You said Chimera was decommissioned." Thorne's expression twisted, not anger, something closer to grief. "You think I wanted this program. You were supposed to be free. But the ones who built you don't erase projects. They rename them." "What happens to her?" "She goes back. They'll shut her down before she wakes the others." Ara felt the world tilt. Rain, noise, faces, all blurring into the same choice. Control or compassion, function or conscience. She lowered her rifle, voice calm. "No one's shutting her down." Roaric stepped forward slowly, eyes on Thorne. "Sir, she's right. If the program's still active, that's not containment, it's cleanup." Thorne looked between them. The old soldier, the reborn operative, the sleeping weapon now breathing behind them. His command fractured under the weight of it. Finally, he exhaled. "You have 10 minutes before the next chopper arrives. After that, she's no longer my responsibility." He turned and walked back into the rain. Roaric met Ara's eyes. "You heard the man." She nodded once. Together, they lifted the weakened girl from the pod. She was light, impossibly so, skin cold as ice. When her head rested against Ara's shoulder, a fragile human sound escaped her, a sigh almost trust. For the first time, Ara's hands trembled, not from fear but from recognition. She wasn't carrying a weapon or a mission. She was carrying what was left of her own beginning. They loaded her into the truck. Engines roared to life. The wreck behind them burned brighter, consuming its own secrets. Hours later, back at Aegis, the medics took the girl into isolation. Thorne filed a report that said nothing and meant everything. Roaric stood outside the infirmary, waiting. When Ara finally stepped out, soaked and exhausted, he asked, "Worth it?" She looked past him, through the glass at the sleeping figure inside. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll deal with the fallout together." The corridor was quiet except for the hum of the lights. "You know they'll come for her," Roaric said. "I know." "You ready for that?" Ara's voice was soft. "For the first time, maybe I am." He studied her face, the steadiness there, the strange peace that looked nothing like obedience. "Then maybe you really are human after all." She didn't smile, but something flickered behind her eyes, light, fragile, alive. Outside, dawn crept across the sky, washing the compound in pale gold. In the infirmary window, the girl stirred, a hand twitching as if reaching for something she couldn't yet name. And somewhere deep in the silence between heartbeats, the last echo of Project Chimera began to fade. How long can truth hide behind uniforms and silence? 2 days after the recovery, the air at Aegis thickened with the kind of tension no alarm could measure. Orders still came. Schedules still ran. But underneath the rhythm, everyone felt it. Something had shifted. Authority was watching again. Commander Thorne hadn't spoken to Ara since the night in the forest. Rooric kept his distance, though he hovered close enough to step in if the walls began to close. The medbay lights stayed on through every hour. Inside, the girl from the pod, Unit 9, slept under soft monitors that hummed like lullabies for ghosts. Ara visited when she could. Sometimes she just stood there, silent, watching the small rise and fall of the girl's chest. Sometimes she caught herself listening for her own breath, matching the rhythm. It was the first time in years she'd felt the difference between life and existence. At dusk, Rooric found her in the observation corridor, hands pressed to the glass. "They'll debrief us soon," he said quietly. "I know. They'll ask if you defied a direct order." "I did. And if I supported it." "You did." He exhaled, could have lied. She looked at him then, calm and steady. "We stopped lying the moment we opened that pod." Rooric scratched at the scar on his temple. "You ever wonder what happens to soldiers who tell the truth?" "Yes," Ara said. "They stop being soldiers." "Then what are we?" Her voice softened. "Maybe the proof that silence doesn't win." The summons came at midnight. Thorne's office glowed like a courtroom, only one light, one table, one file. When Ara stepped in, the commander's expression was carved from exhaustion more than anger. He motioned for her to sit. "The board's convening in 48 hours. They want you transferred to Central Command for evaluation." Termination. Officially, reclassification. She understood the euphemism, and the girl. Still under medical supervision. They'll take her too. Ara folded her hands. "You knew what that program was. Why keep serving it?" Thorne's jaw tightened. "Because someone had to stay close enough to pull people like you out when it started again." It wasn't a confession. It was fatigue shaped into words. "She called me by my code name," Ara said quietly. "Echo," she remembered. Thorne's eyes flickered. "Then she's not stable. Or she's more human than we are." He closed the file slowly. "Whatever you think this is, it won't end the way you want. The people behind Chimera don't lose. They relocate." Ara stood. "Then we make them remember where we are." "Vance." "Sir," she said, and for once the word sounded like respect instead of obedience. "Thank you for not stopping me." She left before he could decide whether to stop her now. Back in the barracks, Rooric was waiting, fully dressed, duffel at his feet. "You planning to vanish before the board meets?" "Not vanish," she said. "Expose." "Big difference." "About 10 seconds." He sighed. "Then I'm coming." "No, you're not." "Gunny's orders." "You're not my Gunny." He gave her a faint grin. "Maybe not, but someone's gotta watch your six while you try to rewrite classified history." They both knew he'd already decided. At 300, they slipped through the motor pool and out past the north perimeter gate. The guard recognized Rooric's credentials and didn't ask questions. Aegis receded in the rearview mirror, its towers glowing faintly like a memory half-believed. Ara navigated by instinct more than map. "There's a relay bunker 12 miles east," she said. "Chimera used it for data backups before the program went dark. If we can get inside, we'll find proof the recall wasn't containment, it was erasure." Rooric checked his sidearm. "And if we can't?" "Then at least we tried before they shut us off." The rain came again, soft at first, then heavier, the kind that smears headlights into ghostly lines. Neither spoke for a long time. Only the road, only the hum of the engine. Finally Rooric said, "You ever wish you stayed in whatever silence they built for you?" She thought about it, sometimes, but then I remember the sound of her breathing. "That kid." "Yes." He nodded, understanding what she didn't need to say. Humanity was measured in who you protect when no one orders you to. The bunker was real, half buried under moss and concrete, forgotten by time but still humming faintly with generator power. They parked a quarter-mile out, moved on foot. The air smelled of rust and rain. Ara's handprint unlocked the outer gate. Old code still recognized her. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed awake after years of sleep. Dust drifted through the beams. "Looks like a tomb," Rooric muttered. "Maybe it is." They descended into the main chamber. Terminals lined the walls, blinking with static. Ara moved between them with precision, fingers flying across old keys. Encrypted archives still intact. Rooric kept watch near the doorway. "We've got maybe an hour before Central tracks this power surge." She nodded, pulling up file after file, numbers, dates, personnel rosters. Then she stopped. One name repeated in the logs, Vance Ara prototype sequence. The entries extended years, beyond the supposed termination date. "They kept running simulations under my name," she said softly. "Different bodies, same code, hundreds." Rooric stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. "Jesus." "They weren't building soldiers," Ara whispered. "They were copying souls." Alarms flickered red across the monitors, external motion sensors. "We've got company," Rooric said. Ara downloaded what she could onto a drive. "Go, I'll cover." He grabbed her arm. "Not this time." They moved together through the narrow corridor as footsteps echoed above. Voices, muffled, organized, not Aegis. "Extraction unit." 3 minutes, Rooric said. They reached the outer hatch when gunfire ripped through the doorway. Concrete dust exploded around them. Ara returned fire, controlled bursts, no hesitation. One figure dropped, another advanced. Rooric shoved her behind a column, blood already seeping through his sleeve. "They're not here for you," he grunted. "They want the drive." "Then they'll have to outlive us." She leaned out, fired again. The last of the intruders retreated into the rain. Silence settled, broken only by thunder. Rooric slid to the ground, breathing hard. "Nothing vital," he said, lying badly. Ara tore a strip from her sleeve, pressed it against the wound. "You're terrible at deception." "Guess I'm learning from the best." They both laughed once, dry, absurd, human. By dawn they reached the ridge overlooking the valley. The world below looked almost peaceful again. Ara plugged the data drive into her wristcom, transmitting encrypted fragments through a stolen channel. Rooric watched her. "Where it going?" "Every independent network left. If Chimera's still hiding, they'll have to do it in daylight now." "Which means they'll come for us next." "I know." He smiled faintly. "Could be worse. At least we'll finally be famous." She turned toward him. "You should go back, tell them you tried to stop me." "And miss the ending, not a chance." For a moment, the silence between them wasn't tactical. It was almost peaceful. Two people who'd outlived the orders that built them. They returned to Aegis under armed escort by noon. Thorn met them at the gate, face unreadable. "You've made enemies in very high places," he said. Ara handed him the empty drive casing. "Then let them chase ghosts." He looked at her, then at Rooric, bandaged, limping, defiant. "You realize you just committed espionage against your own command." Ara's voice was calm. "I realized what loyalty costs." Thorn's shoulders sank. "You're not wrong, but they'll still demand a punishment." "Then give them a story they can survive," she said. "Tell them we were compromised. Tell them the drive was destroyed." He hesitated. You're asking me to lie to people who built the lie. Exactly. After a long pause, Thorn nodded once. You've got 1 hour. After that, I can't protect you. That hour was spent back in the infirmary. Unit 9 was awake now, sitting upright, pale but alert. When Ara entered, the girl smiled faintly. You came back. I said I would. Am I like you? Yes, Ara said softly, but you don't have to be. The girl frowned. They said we were property. They were wrong. Outside the window, guards moved in quiet patterns. The world was already closing again. Rooric leaned against the doorframe, clocks ticking. Ara turned to the girl. They'll try to take you somewhere safe. Don't let them decide what that means. When you're strong enough, find your own orders. Where will you go? Ara hesitated, where they can't track silence. The girl reached out, hand trembling, and Ara took it, skin to skin, warm, human. When she stepped out of the room, Rooric followed without a word. Thorn waited by the exit, holding 2 forged passes. Convoy leaves in 10 minutes, he said. After that, you're ghosts. Ara met his gaze. You were one of them once, weren't you? Thorn's eyes softened. Maybe, but I learned something you already know. Sometimes the only way to keep a soul alive is to let it disappear. He handed her the passes. Go. The truck rumbled down the dirt road, Aegis shrinking in the mirror until it was just light on the horizon. Rooric sat beside her, half asleep, half smiling. So what now? She watched the sky, pale blue after days of rain. Now we stop being definitions. And start what? Living. He chuckled. That a new mission? No, she said, eyes on the dawn ahead. It's the first one that's ours. The road curved east, sun spilling across the windshield, blinding for a heartbeat. When it cleared, they were already miles beyond the maps that had once owned them. And in that stretch of quiet, Ara realized that freedom didn't roar, it whispered. What does freedom sound like when you've never heard it before? 2 weeks after leaving Aegis, the world outside still felt like an unfinished dream. Towns blurred into dust and neon. Roads wound through valleys that no satellite would bother to name. Ara and Rooric kept moving. No uniforms, no ranks, no orders. Just the hum of old engines and the static of uncertain peace. They followed no map. The coordinates they once lived by were gone, burned like the wreckage of Project Chimera. Somewhere in the background, the news began to whisper about a leak, classified files dumped across open networks, references to an erased military experiment. No one named names, but the shape of the truth was there, poolsing beneath headlines. Enough to make people wonder what kind of soldiers never existed on paper. Rooric turned off the radio one morning and glanced at her. You realize that was us they were talking about. Ara sipped from a tin cup of cold coffee. I realize they'll never believe it. Good, he said. Maybe they shouldn't. They drove until the roads thinned into gravel, then into dirt, then into silence. The mountains rose like old guardians. Here, the signal faded completely. No cameras, no command lines, no ghosts of authority. Just wind and the slow patience of time. They parked near an abandoned ranger outpost, windows broken, paint flaked to bone. Rooric climbed down, stretching stiff legs. If I were a myth trying to stay dead, he said, this would be the place. Ara looked at the endless tree line. Maybe that's the point. They made camp that night under a roof that creaked with memory. The stars were sharp, merciless, beautiful. For the first time in her life, Ara felt the absence of surveillance. No voices in her ear. No data feeds whispering her pulse rate. Only breath and the distant call of something living. Freedom was not loud. It was terrifying in its quiet. Rooric built a fire. He moved slower now. The wound in his arm had healed, but not without cost. The lines on his face looked deeper in the firelight. You ever think about going back? He asked. To what? Normal life. Ara smiled faintly. Normal never wanted us. He chuckled, poking the fire with a stick. Maybe not, but I could see you teaching somewhere. Discipline, tactics, self-control. You've got that calm voice that makes people listen. I had that voice because they trained me to erase everything else. Then start using it for yourself. Ara stared into the flames. They danced the way memories do, never still, always flickering between what was and what might have been. Maybe one day, she said softly. Days passed in a rhythm that felt borrowed from another life. They hunted, repaired the roof, gathered rainwater, small tasks that anchored them to the present. Sometimes Rooric told stories from before Aegis, half funny, half sad recollections of a world that seemed impossibly distant. Ara listened, sometimes adding her own fragments. A moment from the desert, a name she once remembered, a song she'd heard in a mess hall before her first deployment. They never spoke about the child in the fire again. They didn't need to. Some memories are meant to be acknowledged only by silence. On the 10th morning, Rooric woke to find Ara gone. Panic rose for a moment, then eased when he saw her tracks leading up toward the ridge. He followed. She stood on the cliff edge, the valley stretching wide below. Wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of pine and rain. In her hands, the whetstone, the same one Rooric had given her months ago. She turned it over once, then placed it on the rock beside her. Edges don't last forever, she said without looking back. Some should, he replied quietly. She smiled. Not if you want to feel the world again. He stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. You planning to stay here? For a while, maybe long enough to forget I was ever designed. Won't be easy. I don't want easy. Rooric studied her profile, the calm lines of a soldier who had finally stopped fighting everyone but herself. What about me? He asked. You'll know when to leave, she said. You always do. They stood together in silence, two figures against the wide, forgiving sky. Below them, the world kept turning, unaware that two of its ghosts were learning how to breathe. That night Ara dreamed again, not of missions, not of fire, but of the girl in the pod. She was standing on a shoreline, sunlight on her face, hair whipping in the wind. She was laughing, just that, a laugh without command or purpose. When Ara woke, the sound lingered, soft and distant like something sacred. She rose quietly, wrapped her jacket tight, and stepped outside. The stars were fading. Dawn was coming. Somewhere far off, a hawk cut through the sky, a dark shape against light. For a long time, she just watched it go. Weeks became months. The forest changed colors. The air thinned with winter. They moved from the outpost to a small cabin deeper in the valley where no path reached easily. Rooric had found it on an old map labeled only Observation Post 9. One evening, as snow began to fall, he found Ara sitting by the fire carving something from a piece of wood. When he looked closer, he saw it was a small figurine, rough, unfinished. A girl's face. "Who's that?" he asked. "Someone who reminded me to wake up." "Unit 9. Ara nodded. If she made it out, she'll need a story to believe she's real. "She'll hear it," Rooric said. "Sooner or later, stories find their way back." Ara placed the carving on the mantel beside the dull whetstone. Two symbols, one of sharpness, one of softness, both hers. That night a storm rolled in, violent, unrelenting, the kind that shakes the world clean. Lightning cracked across the valley. The generator died. They lit candles, the flicker painting the walls gold. Rooric poured 2 cups of coffee from a dented pot. "So," he said, voice barely audible over the wind, "if tomorrow we wake up to find the world finally caught up with us, what do you want to be remembered for?" Ara thought for a long time before answering, for not following orders that felt wrong. "That's it. That's everything." He smiled, slow and proud. "Then you did it." She looked at him, the corners of her mouth softening. "So did you." When the storm ended, the world outside was white and quiet. Rooric slept on the cot near the fire, snoring lightly. Ara stepped outside, snow crunching beneath her boots. The horizon glowed pale blue, clouds parting just enough for light to spill through. She knelt, brushed her fingers through the snow, and whispered, not to the air but to the past. "I forgive you," she said. She didn't know whether it was to the program, to Thorn, to herself, maybe to all of them. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about no longer needing revenge to feel whole. She stood watching the sun rise. The world was new again, fragile and cold and alive. Months later, in a distant town, a message appeared on a secure civilian network. Encrypted, unsigned, but with a familiar rhythm in its words. Echoes fade, but they don't vanish. We build from what survives. AV. It spread quietly, passed through servers like a whisper between ghosts. Some said it came from a defected operative. Others said it was propaganda. But somewhere in a safe house under a new name, a young woman, Unit 9, read it and smiled. She looked up from the screen to the horizon. The world, once cruel and mechanical, suddenly felt wide enough to breathe in. She closed her eyes, whispered the same words. Echoes fade, but they don't vanish. Far north in the cabin by the ridge, Rooric sat on the porch steps, sharpening a knife. The whetstone, now almost worn smooth, rested beside him. When Ara returned from the tree line, he handed it to her. "Your turn." She shook her head. "Not today." He nodded. "Good. Blades aren't meant to live forever sharp." She looked out at the valley below, the soft trail of their footprints, already disappearing under snow. "Neither are soldiers." Rooric smiled. "Then what are we?" She thought about it. The mountains, the air, the freedom in her lungs. Maybe just people who finally stopped needing to prove we existed. He nodded. "That's a start." The sun dipped low, the world tinted gold. For a while they didn't speak. Words weren't needed. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore, it was full. Later that night, as the fire crackled low, Ara sat alone, writing in a small notebook Rooric had found months before. The pages were rough, the handwriting careful. She wrote, "We were built to obey, then rebuilt to forget. But somewhere between silence and survival, we learned to feel. And maybe that was the mission all along, to prove that even the quiet ones can change the sound of history. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts." She closed the book, placed it beside the wooden carving on the mantel, and exhaled softly. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo through the valley, something between a sigh and a song. Not command, not code, just life. And in that sound, Ara Vance, once echo, once nothing, became exactly what she was never designed to be: free, final, poetic, moral. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.